So I thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. This is an important piece of legislation. Thank you guys for coming all the way out here. We're really happy to have them and have kind of a firsthand, real-life human face to what this legislation will do. What I'd like to do is kind of have Diego and his mom give their story, tell their, they give their background, why they think it's important. Have you say a few words about why we're working on the legislation, and then kind of open it up for questions. And then if we have any other needs afterwards, I know they're going to be here for the afternoon, and you can talk to me, and happy to schedule something. So without further ado, whichever one of you want to start.
Yeah.
So what question would you like us to answer
Well,
first, or give background?
Yeah, why don't you just give a little background and then open up the questions.
2 years ago, I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, which is a rare bone tumor in my left knee, and I received chemotherapy treatment and had a resection in my knee to have the tumor taken out, and then had titanium prosthetic put in, and now I use that. And then while I was doing my chemotherapy treatment, my parents' friends who are physicians learned about a drug that was an experimental drug called mefirmatide, or MTP, but it's not approved in the U.S. It's only approved in Europe and other countries outside of the U.S. So we learned about it, and we ended up moving to London for 9 months so that I could finish my chemotherapy and also get this MTP, because it showed signs that it could help make sure that my tumor never came back. And that's sort of how I got involved with Right to Try, because my parents and I spoke, and we wanted to do whatever we could to help make sure that no person was in the situation that we were in, having to move to another country, because most people won't even have that opportunity. So we want to make sure that the system is as easy as possible.
Yes. What other questions?
Yeah, sure.
So how sure are you that it was the new UK drug that helped? I mean, how sure are you that that is what it was?
You can answer, or do you want to? Well, when my husband and I were doing very quick research and calling literally physicians around the country and in other countries, we've traveled to Mexico City to see the drug. They were using the drug there and see their results. And one of the physicians, I think the principal investigator, the lead investigator of the drug, we had a conference call with him in New York, and he said, you're never going to know if this is the drug that saved Diego's life, that caused the cancer not to return. And we said we didn't care. It didn't matter. What matters is that we save our child's life. So we weren't looking for any guarantees, just a chance.
What did the doctors told you? You tried everything else, presumably here in the US, and what was the prognosis? How long had they given you? What did they say to you before you decided to move over there?
Well, one of the deciding factors was with osteosarcoma, you have 10 weeks of chemotherapy, standard chemotherapy. Everyone who has osteosarcoma, I believe, has that before the resection of the tumor, and hopefully it's called limb salvage surgery. So your hope is to save the limb. And in Diego's case, they were able to do that, thank God, and then put in titanium. And when they resect the tumor, they look at the necrosis of the tumor in terms of that initial chemo. And they were hoping, I think, to see at least 80% of the tumor affected by that chemo. Unfortunately, in Diego's case, it was only 50%. So that told us two things. He was going to need extensive chemotherapy, 21 toxic rounds, and also that we needed to do whatever we could to make sure this didn't come back. So that was part of our decision.
So just to be clear, they didn't say you've only got 6 months to live or anything like that. They just said the chances aren't good and you should look around for the best kind of medicine anywhere you can find it? Or
No, the doctors didn't say that. But we have friends who are physicians who brought this drug to our attention. And he's a radiation oncologist, she's a pediatrician, and they said, we've taken a look at osteosarcoma and what's going on around the world, and we think, they said, you're all like our family. Diego's like our son, and your younger son, Mateo, is like our own children. And if this were our girls, we'd go and get this drug.
What was the prognosis then at the time when you found out that only 50% of the tumor was affected? And then what were the risks that you were told came with this drug that you were contemplating?
Yeah, that's interesting. So osteosarcoma is not good, and it's a rare bone cancer. We didn't talk about months or worst case. What we wanted to do was be positive and fight this with everything we could. With mefirmatide in particular, it's interesting because we read and we tried to learn as much about it and the side effects. And what's interesting is that it really only gives flu-like symptoms when they give you the dose through an IV. Now Diego
hadn't experienced with the chemotherapy though.
Right, the chemotherapy is toxic, much worse. So actually, I think Diego would say the MTP wasn't too bad.
No.
And he had 48 doses of that drug, so that's why we needed to be in England that long.
Did you think about potential side effects that you don't know of at the time, given that the long term?
Sure, but I think about that with Tylenol. I think about that with every drug we take. We made an informed decision as best we could under a traumatic situation, and did as much research and talked to the person who started these trials with MTP in the U.S., and we felt it was worth it. We felt it was worth it because we know that osteosarcoma, if and when cancer returns, it's often in the lungs, and then it's really difficult to fight. We know another little boy who's fighting that right now. So side effects, we wanted to keep our son alive.
So did the doctors not tell you what stage the cancer was in?
I think osteosarcoma is a little different in terms of staging. It's either metastasized or
that's
not.
the big difference, if it's metastasized or not in terms of longevity.
So what did they tell you about the state of the cancer when they found it?
Well, thank God we found this very early. Thank goodness we have a wonderful pediatrician who knows Diego well, who knew something was wrong immediately, and he's got a mom who's willing to take him to the doctor pretty quickly. And that was a Wednesday when the pediatrician saw him. On Thursday, we were at the orthopedic surgeon. He rushed us down to the MRI the same day, and our friends got us to St. Jude by Monday. So thank God we found this early, and that was one of the requirements for the trial with MTP, although it was already closed, we weren't eligible for that, Diego wasn't eligible, is that it hadn't metastasized. It was very specific of what the patient would look like.
Can you describe where we're at with approval of this drug in this country? What barriers are being encountered? I don't know if you've done research into that or if you know about that.
Do you know the most recent?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's an active clinical trial right now. It was a large trial a number of years ago that was inconclusive, and that's what caused the FDA to not approve it in the United States. Interestingly, the similar European regulatory agency looked at the same data and approved it, and it was really not approved in the United States by the FDA more because of a technical reason, that the study wasn't designed up to specifications. They basically tried to do too much in the trial. So not that the drug had big side effects or wasn't effective enough, just that the trial wasn't designed according to their specifications.
And I'm sorry. It's legal in Europe. You said Mexico. Any other
Israel.
countries?
Israel. I haven't looked lately, but quite a few countries have approved it, and they're using it.
Yeah, and the sad thing, in the United States, there hasn't really been any significant improvement in the treatment of this disease since I was a medical student, which was a long time ago, really since the late 1980s, when it afflicts kids like Diego, usually in their teenage years when they have the most hope and most passion for life. It's doubly troubling.
Well, if it's so successful in Israel and Mexico, why haven't they done another trial here in the U.S.?
Yeah, really good question. These types of clinical trials are really expensive, take a long time, and there's even more barriers when you're talking about entering kids into these trials in terms of legal risk and regulatory burden. So it's even harder for kids to get into these trials.
And presumably there's not enough people who are sick with that particular disease that it doesn't pencil out.
That's right. There's very few kids, well, it depends on how you look at it, very few kids for doing a trial. About 1,000 a year in the United States get osteosarcoma, and then, of course, then they have to qualify for the trial. So to get enough kids, to have enough numbers to make it valid is a long time.
What about the other side of this? Like, the Science Monitor has written about worrying about using people as guinea pigs, and you could presumably look around different countries and say, well, this drug has been tried out here, let's try it out. What are the protections? How are you going to make sure that more people don't get hurt than get help?
Yeah, well, I think we have to have a very rigorous informed consent process, and that's certainly included in our legislation. And then ultimately, it's up to the patient's choice if they want to enter into this kind of treatment. And I think that's the ultimate check.
What would you say about that? Because the other side is the word that people are going to be treated like guinea pigs, and in your case, it doesn't sound like there was a terminal, that you hadn't been given a terminal diagnosis.
Right.
Yeah. So what do you say about that?
Well, I know in Arizona, our legislation required the drug to have been through phase 1 of the FDA process, but I think it goes on much longer than that. I mean, if I understand right, the average is 10 years for the process, and maybe $1 billion or something. It's amazing. So there are safeguards, and this has to be, at least in Arizona, done in conjunction with your physician, and again, like Representative Beuhler said, an informed decision that you're willing to take. If you can get all the facts, and as we did, saw the side effects were not significant compared to chemotherapy, which Diego also had, then you should be able to make that decision and have a chance to save your life, or to save your child's life, or your loved one, whatever the case is.
What is Diego's current status now? Is he in remission, or?
I'm in remission.
How long have you been in remission?
A year and a half? 2 years?
But 2 years.
2 years. I've been in
And how
remission
long
for 2 years.
before you're considered? Is it a 5-year mark that you're?
There are different milestones. So I think there's a year and 18 months and 3 years, and every year is good. I give thanks every day. One more day.
Diego, how do you feel about that aspect of perhaps being treated as I don't mean it in a derogatory way, it's the only way I can think of saying it, as a guinea pig, we're going to try this, we're kind of desperate. You were all for it, or what did you think about it?
Yes, I mean, I trusted the research that my parents had done, and I believe that, I think if you're in that situation where it could be a terminal illness, I think you'll do anything to try and save your life. So, if you really think it could help, then I think you should try it.
Now, I'll also add that Diego wasn't crazy about leaving home, nor was his little brother. And we had a puppy, and it's the worst time in your life when you're given this diagnosis and other terminal diagnosis, and it's very difficult at a time when your own bed, your own home, your loved ones, your support network. My husband had to commute from London to Phoenix. He had to keep his business going. So it is incredibly difficult to uproot your family at such a difficult time in your life. We were blessed that we were able to do it, and we had family in London who really helped us. But a lot of people don't have that option, so they should have that option in the United States. People in London, the healthcare workers, many times are from around the world, very international city, and so many of them would say, "We're shocked you're American and you're getting care here." We should be able to get that care here in the United States.
If you had a magic wand and you could change the FDA process, what would you do? I mean, presumably they'd say, we have these protections in for a good reason. Have you an idea of how you'd like to change things?
I'm not the expert on the FDA. I'm here as Diego's mom and to advocate for right to try, but I would say it's too long. It's too costly, and there are better methods, and they've just proven that by helping correcting part of their compassionate care process.
Their process right now is, been estimated to take a physician to fill out the paperwork 8 hours. The drug manufacturers over 100 hours, and very few people have gone through that process. Now, recently they've come out with some amendments. That's yet to be seen if it's actually going to be used any more than the past process. But I think just this right to try legislation in several states has put enough pressure on the FDA that they are starting to review their process after many years of requests. So I think already the right to try effort has had really good positive outcomes.
This is more of a legislative question. Obviously, this is a best case scenario. I imagine the bill is going to have all kinds of liability waivers for the state if they do this. I guess my question is, A, how do we ensure those hold up? And then B, how do we avoid PR nightmare, if anything else, that, Oregon is the state where someone comes and has something horrible happen to, your child or something like that?
Well, I think I'd like to see, the Oregon politics to show the same courage that Diego's showing on a personal level to remove these barriers to potentially life-saving treatments. And I think we can take care of some of those barriers, but it's going to take people working together across party lines to structure the best bill possible, and that's what we're working on right now in our work groups.
And I might add, from a mother's standpoint, it was, thank God we had the outcome we had, and we're able to go home to Arizona and our home, and Diego had a choice. He was finally getting back to a typical teenage life. And at 13, it's pretty brave to say, I'm going to go public with my story so I can help others, I can help other kids. So it's really important that children have access to drugs under this legislation as well. So Diego's doing great, and he's in the 8th grade now and 14 and vice president of his student body, and finding out tomorrow if he get into the high school of his choice. So things are great, and we all feel in our family that we have to give back. We're very fortunate.
As an orthopedic surgeon who's treated kids like Diego, this is a tough disease. And the last thing you want to do as a physician is to come to someone like Diego and his parents and say, we don't have anything further to offer you. That is a really hard conversation to have. And at least with Right to Try, we provide people with more choices and more options for treatment. And that's really what this is all about.
Just devil's advocate, that's not what I understand. They didn't say we don't have other options. They went out and actively tried to find what you thought was the best for your child.
That's not correct.
That's not correct.
So chemotherapy was available to us here, but mefirmatide is not. And there are no alternatives to mefirmatide. Diego had chemotherapy in conjunction with the MTP. There was no alternative for that part of it. Representative Beuhler would be able to explain it better than I would, but it's more of insurance. It's more for prevention, prevent it from coming back in the lungs in particular.
What it sounds like, though, is that it sounds like you second guess the doctors here, because they say, well, we have chemotherapy, and you're like, well, okay, that's one option, but we're going to look elsewhere here. Pretty soon, people are putting their own medical hat on and coming up with all kinds of ideas.
I don't think that's the case. I think that's a mischaracterization. It's clear that the drug increases survival, at least based on the studies I've looked at and the studies that the European regulatory agencies looked at. So it's not a second guessing. It's providing a better option that's not available right now in the United States because of the regulatory hurdles that were introduced with the FDA here.
And we get second opinions in the United States, and we consider our options, and we often speak with more than one physician when we're encountering an illness. So I don't think it's any different.
My problem is I don't think this law, the Right to Try law, would be of help for you, because I understand, maybe I haven't read the law correctly, it would have helped.
Yeah. Because he has a terminal, his osteosarcoma without treatment is a terminal disease.
So what you would need is a physician to say this is a terminal disease and you've got X amount of months or years to live.
What about, is there any prerequisite as to how much information a physician needs to give the patient and their family, if it's a minor, before they make the decision, and they can't get just the Cliff's Notes on maybe what a drug is.
Yeah, absolutely. A very rigorous, informed consent process, with the patient in the case of a child with the parents is absolutely necessary, and that's the case for almost any medical intervention or significant drug that you're going to give someone.
So we have Diego's going to be meeting and his mom are going to be meeting with some of the legislators on the committees. So maybe one more question, and then we got to wrap it up.
Okay. Diego, can you talk about, your life now, now that you've been back home? Your mom briefly talked about, you're hoping to get into high school that you want, and you're VP of the student body and things like that. Are you playing sport?
I think he wants to be a state representative.
Oh, really? No pressure.
Yes, I am playing sports. I'm playing baseball, and I'm able to participate in PE at school. I can't do a ton of running, but with sports that involve just a little bit of running, it's fine. And I'm still able to play games with my friends, and pretty much other than the large amount of running factor, it's been pretty normal for me.
Diego, if you could go back, would you do it all over again?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Diego, Paulina, thank you guys.
Our pleasure.